the city's site. So, but just wanted to let everyone know we'd be recording. And good morning, and thank you all for coming to hear more about this project. We're really excited. My team, Afore Preservation Consulting, has been working in Montgomery the last few years on civil rights site documentation with the Alabama Historical Commission. So we're excited to continue working in these neighborhoods to continue to document the civil rights story in a different way, this time through oral histories and some community scanning sessions. And we just thank you all for being here with us this morning and lending your insight and expertise to this project. I thought I would start with just a brief introduction so that we can all know who all's on the call, and then I'll kind of pass it off to Warren and Sean from the city to tell us a bit more about the project, this project, and the background of it. As I said, my name is Katie, and I'm a preservation consultant. I live in Florence, Alabama, but I'm originally from Birmingham. But like I said, for the past 3 or so years, I've done quite a bit of work in Montgomery, documenting civil rights stories through the National Register of Historic Places process, which in a little bit, I'll have my colleague Sherry share with you the work we've done in the Peacock Tract specifically, so we can kind of all wrap our heads around what geographic area we're talking about and what history we're talking about. So that's me. Sherry, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll just kind of pass it on?
Sure. So like Katie, I do the same kind of National Register and architectural survey sort of research and documentation as a consultant. I spent many years in Tennessee and North Carolina and have now moved back to the Midwest. So I'm coming to you from Michigan, where it's slightly chillier than I think it is where y'all are. So have really enjoyed working in Montgomery on the National Register projects, and I'm really excited to sort of take the next step with this oral history project. So we're just really glad that all of you are here, and we look forward to moving forward with you.
Let's see, Sean, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Glad to see you all here. I'm Sean Rose. I'm the Historic Preservation Coordinator for the city, primarily working in the locally designated historic districts, but I'm also very interested in this project as well as others related to the civil rights movement. So I'll be helping to coordinate between the city and the consultant firm, Katie and Sherry here, to conduct the oral history project, the interviews themselves, plan to attend some of the interviews, and then also the scanning sessions. So here to help in any way that I can, and again, glad to see everybody here. And we're looking forward to getting the project started here as well.
Thank you. I see Mary Jo.
Hi, I'm Mary Jo Shen, and I'm a guest of Vincent's today, who told us about the project. Eager to hear what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Vincent?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Vincent Hall, resident of Peacock Tract, and Mary Jo, and I think there might be 3 or 4 other of her colleagues. They're out of New York, and they are a theatrical production with a play called We Shall Someday. So they came down, I guess, about 3 weeks ago and toured the Peacock Tract and parts of the city. So they have an interest in this community and wanted to join the call. So I welcomed them and showed them the little Southern hospitality when they were here.
That's great. Thanks, Vincent.
For sure.
Carol King. Sorry, Carol, you're still muted.
Lost it. Yep, there we go. Okay, I'm Carol King. I'm with Landmarks Foundation here in Montgomery, and we're just interested in this community preservation aspect.
Thank you for being here. Ted?
I am part of the musical theater group, guest of Vincent. We are very interested in seeing whether our show, which is scheduled to be performed at Alabama Shakespeare Festival next spring can be used in some way to connect with the community because of the narrative of the show, which is very much about the South. And we're honored that you are willing to include us in this meeting, and we're very interested in finding out as much as we can about Peacock Tract. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Warren?
Hi, I'm Warren Adams, the Land Use Control Administrator for the City of Montgomery. I oversee zoning, subdivisions, historic preservation, urban forestry, and I sort of inherited the grant management aspect of this project from Christy Anderson when she left for another position. So I'm looking forward to keeping this one moving along. I will be on this call and I can take any questions or anything, but I'm currently working on another grant application which is due tonight for the survey of another 2 African American segregated neighborhoods. So I will be here in spirit and in listening, but I'm also trying to hammer out this grant application which is due for submittal tonight. So I will be here listening, but I'll only be involved if there's any questions.
Thank you, Warren. I'm going to ask CP to introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. I'm CP Everett IV. I was in 1947 and am presently the project director for the restoration of the oldest church in Peacock. Just delighted to be on with you. I consider myself now a student of Peacock Tract. I've written 3 documents, including a play about Peacock. So I'm just delighted to be a part of this conversation today.
Thank you for being here, CP. Okay, and let's see. Who else do we have? Desmond Wilson from Montgomery.
Good morning. My name is Desmond Wilson. I'm the Director of Community Development for the City of Montgomery. I'm also a former resident of Peacock Tract. Grew up with Vincent Hall. And I guess when Warren said the baton was passed to him on this particular application, I was the one that passed it on to Warren. And we're doing a lot of planning for the Peacock Tract. I think in the future here, you're going to see a lot of different changes, whether it relates to housing, public art, but the idea is to revive the Peacock Tract and make it a tourist destination. So I'm very proud to be here and willing to help in any way I possibly can.
Awesome. Thank you, Desmond. Susan?
Hey, y'all. I am with the We Shall Someday project as well, though I confess I am not a New Yorker. I am a Southerner as well from Georgia, but I've been in Mississippi for the last 25 years as a civil rights historian and as a facilitator of racial healing, reckoning, and repair conversations. So that's what I hope to be bringing in support of this great work. Big fan of Vincent and Desmond and all the folks who are doing such great work in Peacock Tract. So just excited to be here and be supportive.
Thank you. Kelbree?
Hello, I am Kelbree Porter, the Grants Department Director for the City of Montgomery, Alabama. And also listening in is District 4 Councilwoman Riley for the Peacock Tract.
Great. Thank you for being here. Megan?
Hi, I'm Megan Locker, and I'm also with the We Shall Someday project team. And I am based in New York on my end, and I'm grateful to Vincent for the invitation to join today to learn, and really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. Let's see, we have Dan. Let's see. Dan on an iPhone, it looks like. Or let's see, Dan, if you hear us, just jump in whenever you can. Ethelina?
Hello, I'm Ethelina Persons, and I live in New York and spend a great deal of time in Montgomery. And I appreciate being there every time I'm there. There's some event related to historical times with the communities that are in and around where I live. I also have a neighbor who has lived in the Peacock Tract area. And she told me about this event, and because we're there so much and we want to know more about what's going on with the project.
Great, thank you for joining us. Madeline?
Hey, I'm Madeline Lambert. I'm the Associate Artistic Director at Alabama Shakespeare Festival and also on the producing team for We Shall Someday and fellow dreamer schemer with Vincent.
That's great, thank you. Let's see, who are we missing? Oh, Dr. Robinson, I see you just joined. Dr. Robinson? It says connecting, so I don't know if he can hear us. I saw in the chat that Dr. Franklin was with us too, but I don't see her now unless she is. There's somebody on iPad number 4.
It's Georgette.
Georgette. Hey, Miss Georgette.
How are you?
Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Georgette Norman. I'm a native Montgomeryan. Worked for a while with the city around the project, trying to do something in Peacock Tract. And I'm very interested in where we are at this point in time.
Thank you for being with us today. Dr. Robinson, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Great.
Hello?
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. I'm Dr. Howard Robinson. I work at Alabama State University with the National Center for the Study of Civil Rights and African American Culture. And actually, this meeting, Dr. Janice Franklin, the dean of the library and the director of the National Center, wanted to make sure I sat in on this meeting. I attended a previous meeting, and so, but she wanted to make sure that we had a presence on this meeting.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And I saw that she had some questions in the chat, so we'll make sure to circle back with her after the meeting.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you all for being here. I don't know if I missed anybody. There was somebody on, let's see, there was one person who I don't think Dan. So if you want to jump in, feel free to. But otherwise, I'm going to pass it off to Sean to tell you a little bit about the project, this particular project and its background and what the city is hoping to accomplish with it.
Yeah, so primarily we are studying the impact of the interstate highway interchange that was built through the Peacock Tract. That's really the primary focus of the oral history interviews that we'll be doing, but you know, there will be certainly other elements that are brought out as far as the community goes, how things were in the community, you know, before this occurred, and how the you know, basically what the impetus was for that perceived retaliation based on the civil rights activities and activism that was ongoing there in the neighborhood. So that's really what we're trying to capture is this kind of information. So the oral history interviews will be invaluable because these, you know, these are essentially primary source documents that will be created from folks who lived in the neighborhood. And this is information that, you know, is not available in the archival record, essentially. And so that's, oral histories are very important as a methodology to collect that information directly from people who live there. to get their firsthand accounts of the experience of living there, and also what was done, as far as the damage that was done by that the highway system, and then looking forward to ways to that's really what we want to do, is to use this information to inform other efforts. As Desmond mentioned, there's a lot of ongoing efforts to revitalize this area. We have multiple grant projects that are, some of which are sort of above my purview, but I'm very interested in what those entail. The Department of Transportation, I believe, has a big grant that was awarded to the city to help with the infrastructure in this area. There's like some sort of micro transit hub, all these kind of things. So that's primarily what this is for, is to help inform these other projects that are oncoming from the city to help address the wrongs of the past. So that's the way that we're viewing this project, and the way that we would like to use this as an interpretive tool to help fill some of the gaps that are in the archival record, through these primary source documents. There's also, I think that Katie and Sherry can speak more toward, the collection aspect. So there will be, collected interviews. They will be transcribed. And yesterday we just had a meeting actually to help to nail down where we will be storing these materials, and they will be accessible to the public. So if you all want to speak more to that, Katie or Sherry, then certainly go ahead.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, and we will. I want to talk a bit more about this project specifically in just a minute, but I want to let Sherry share with you the work, the historical research and work that we've done on the Peacock Tract so far. That has all kind of culminated in a National Register of Historic Places Historic District nomination that goes before the Alabama State Review Board next month. So we thought it might be helpful to kind of give you some of that historical background, but also kind of talk about the geography of Peacock as we're thinking about, what Peacock is and what this project, what we're trying to learn about through this project. So I'm going to pass it to Sherry and let her share her screen with us.
Okay, can we see that okay?
Yes.
Good, thanks. All right. I'm working with two screens. So let me get organized. And when it looks like I'm not looking, I actually am. It's just my other screen. So the National Register project is completely separate from the oral history project that we're talking about today. But since Katie and I did both, and since they're so closely related, we thought it would be nice just to fill you guys in on the National Register project, even though we're really here to talk about the oral history project. So what I'm going to show you is the presentation that we'll be doing for the State Review Board, which is the step before going to the National Park Service to be approved. So we're at the very, very end of the National Register projects. We nominated multiple things. This is the last one. So as that's ending, we're getting ready to start the next thing with the oral history project. So the district is associated with the multiple property documentation form that we did as a part of that previous project. It's called the Civil Rights Movement in Montgomery, Alabama, 1850 to 1984. And as you all know, Peacock Tract is a late 19th, early 20th century neighborhood, segregated with its own residential, commercial, and institutional buildings, generally built. What's left there today is generally built between about 1900 and 1977. And I'm going to sort of run through the areas of significance here. Of course, you guys know where this is, but we do a few maps for the State Review Board. This is the boundary for the historic district. I'll give you guys just a minute to look at it. Generally, it's bounded by Day Street, Rosa Parks Avenue, Early and Mill Streets, and then Oak Street. And it's based on this sort of very early historic plat map of the neighborhood. So it's very old. The it's a little bit blurry, I know, but it's Day Street up here at the top. Plank, which is now Rosa Parks, over here on the east side. Here's Mill Street here in the middle, so it would be Early down here at the bottom. And then we have Oak Street here in the middle, which is now our western boundary for the district, but it extends all the way west over toward where the railroad tracks would be today. So just to give you a sense of that. We focused the district on this eastern section because that was where sort of the greatest density of intact historic residences and community institutions were located. Things sort of break up a little. You get a lot more vacant land and open land as you move sort of west. So we took this more concentrated area east of Oak Street. And we know that sort of the boundaries sort of fluid over time and has changed over time. And so though this is the boundary for the historic district and we have to be firm and clear in what that boundary is for the historic district, for the oral history project, it can be more about community and sort of the general consensus of what is in Peacock as that has changed over time. And people outside of Peacock certainly have experiences inside of Peacock. And so all of that is a little less strict for the oral history project. So this is just to give you a sense of what we're looking at and sort of explain the boundary for the district, but that will not be as important going forward for the oral history project. So this district is significant for many reasons, as we know, and I'm just going to kind of run through these. We nominated under Criterion A. Criterion A in the National Register is broad patterns of history. So this is where you'll find things like Black history, civil rights, education, recreation, that kind of stuff, agriculture, all of those sort of topics in history. And so we nominated for Black ethnic heritage and civil rights, of course. The district is significant for its role in the Montgomery bus boycott, obviously sparked by the arrest of Rosa Parks, who lived in the district, and the boycott being planned at Mount Zion, AME Zion, and the Holt Street Baptist churches, and then implemented and supported and made to work by the people who were living in the district. We've already Sean sort of introduced the importance of this neighborhood and in relation to the interstates being built. And I think that nothing can explain verbally what these two pictures show. On the left is the Peacock Tract in 1958, and on the right is 1972. It's sort of hard to look at. So this is obviously a really, really important part of the story, and it's a really important part of this history. And it's important not just for Montgomery, but because it happened other places and has not been recognized in the way that it should be. So we made a big effort to make that happen here. And this is the first nomination to the National Register that we are aware of that includes an interstate interchange as a contributing structure within the inventory as part of the historic district, and talked about in the same way that we talk about all of the houses and the funeral home and the churches and all of those things. And that's never been done before. So we think that it's going to be a really important sort of paving the way for this retaliatory policy to be recognized, not just in Montgomery, but in other places too. So the Selma to Montgomery March, of course, was also very important. So sort of starting with the bus boycott, and then in spite of that retaliation, the people in this district are continuing to lead and participate in civil rights activities. And so we have the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965, goes right through the district, corner to corner, basically. This West Side newsstand used to be on what is now Fred Gray Avenue. It's not there anymore, but people just sort of, those who weren't already participating sort of flooded out of their houses and watched from their porches and joined the march. And it just grew dramatically in numbers as it passed through the Peacock Tract. Criterion B in the National Register is association with an important person. That list could probably go on and on and on for this neighborhood. We included 4 of the most important, most significant, most well-known, well-documented people who lived in the district and were involved in those civil rights activities. So of course, Rosa Parks is one of those. The Nancy Gray house, which is the boyhood home of Fred Gray, who I just read his biography, and like I already knew he was such a fascinating and interesting person, and I just loved it. So I'm really glad we're able to include this too, because his home was just outside our district boundary. We included this, and we were able to include him under that criterion B and recognize his contributions, not just in Montgomery, but to the civil rights movement more broadly. The E.D. Nixon house, which obviously is well recognized already, but we were able to include him under our criterion B as well. And then the Charlie and Lucille Times house. The Times Cafe is not standing anymore, but their house still is. And so we're glad to be able to recognize them and their efforts in all of these, supporting all of these civil rights activities. We also nominated back under criterion A, and for those broad patterns of history, we did social history. And this is really about the neighborhood being a self-sufficient, segregated Black neighborhood in the Jim Crow South. And it's platted on a former plantation. Many of the first residents were formerly enslaved people on that plantation. And then by 1900, you have this, thriving independent Black community that has grown out of this sort of troubled past. And that self-sufficiency is really important. So we have modest homes, generally dating to the early 20th century. There's a lot of things that are, almost everything is vernacular, but we have some where you can sort of see craftsman style details or ranch style details peeking out a little bit. So we have some sort of interesting modest architecture in the neighborhood. We have schools, of course, the beautiful Loveless School. There were churches, lots and lots of churches. I could only put pictures of a couple. That's all that would fit on the screen. So we could never fit them all. But of course, the churches are so important in the Black community as a center of community and activity and social support and uplift. And so the presence of all of the churches is really important to that self-sufficiency as a segregated neighborhood. We have businesses. So there's a couple of funeral homes that we made sure to include. There are these few commercial buildings. These ones are on Rosa Parks Avenue and sort of held a variety of different businesses over the years. And so that sort of presence of local business and Black owned business is also, of course, really important. And then there are other community institutions like the library and the YMCA that are important to the development of a community and sort of the self-sufficiency of the neighborhood. And so similar to the photos I showed you, this is the Sanborn map for right where the highway interchange is today. And so there are commercial buildings, there's restaurants I can see. This is a storefront. We have a movie theater. This was a church. Another storefront up here. And obviously all of these houses and all of those things were destroyed to build that highway. And so that's one of the things that we really want to explore with the oral history project. The National Register can be very narrow because we're making a very specific and technical argument, and it has to fit under those criterion and those areas of significance. We have a lot more freedom with the oral history project to really explore that and how did that affect people day to day, and what were people's experiences and how did people recover from that. And so so that is sort of how we're hoping to kind of leap from the National Register project into this oral history project. But that is the gist of the historic district, and it goes before the State Review Board. Is it the 26th, Katie? September 26th. You can view that meeting. They live stream it. So if you go to the
yes,
Alabama
26.
Historical Commission's website, you can get the link there and view the live stream, and hopefully it will glide right through these last few levels of review and be officially listed toward the end of this year, maybe early next year. So that's where the historic district stands.
Thank you, Sherry. I was going to say, CP, do you have anything that you would like to add just in thinking about what is the Peacock Tract and what, if people are thinking, I don't know if I, belong to Peacock or if my story is important to Peacock, is there anything you would like to add?
Here's the way I think it makes it easy to understand. Peacock equals West Montgomery. Peacock equals West Montgomery. When John Gray developed that plat map that is 100 acres, it encompasses, as you indicated, a distinct space. And if anyone ever had a question as to whether he or she lived in Peacock, then it's on the deed. My family dwelling was at 746 Glass Street. The deed says Peacock Tract. Mount Zion Zion Church, 657 South Hope. The deed says Peacock Tract. So it's a very defined space. No questions. As a matter of fact, it's so defined that when you get over into areas like Hill Street, the even addresses are in the Carlisle Tract. The odd addresses are in the Peacock Tract. So it is just that defined. Now, when you broaden this to Michael Peacock's plantation, you go from the 100 acres that you see on that gray plat map to 300 acres. And there are a lot of places like the Westcott area and Washington Park that were part of the 300-acre plantation. So to make it easy for anyone to understand is that if you lived in West Montgomery, or if you still live in West Montgomery, more than likely you are in Peacock. Peacock Tract specifically is a space that we could identify. But when you look at it from a broad point of view, the 300 acres of Michael Peacock's plantation encompass all of what has been traditionally known as West Montgomery.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Now here's the urgency.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the urgency. As I indicated, I was born in 1947, and I made out a list of individuals that I knew, that I know who reside in the Peacock Tract area, and our generation is in that late 60, 80, 90-year-old category. And the urgency is that many of us still, are in our right minds. We still can remember Peacock, but then that age group is passing on. So the idea of capturing their thoughts, capturing their memories is so important and urgent. So the longer you delay in terms of getting the oral history going, the more of this valuable human resource will be lost.
That's a great point, CP. And that kind of, it helps us as we're thinking about prioritizing who we can interview for this project, because we do have, it is a grant funded project. So we do have a limited amount of time for this particular project. So there's only so many people or so many numbers of people that we can interview. But I think, like you said, prioritizing some of those folks who are older and might not be with us very much longer, I think is really important, particularly for this first phase of a project like this. Thank you, CP. Anything else you want to say?
As I was compiling that list,
mm-hmm.
I was knocked out by the names that were on that list. That list has 2 magistrate judges that grew up in Peacock. You had already mentioned Fred Gray. His property was a little into the Carlisle tract, but we've got doctors, an abundance of educators, school administrators. It's just amazing the number of people who were not just average citizens, but who made great strides. City clerk, county commissioner, first woman on the county commission. All of these individuals grew up in Peacock. So it's just a very valuable resource.
I agree. Yeah. Well, thank you, CP. Yeah, so I mean, what we're trying to do, and so I guess now I'll tell you a little bit more about this project, is the collection of oral histories. We hope to start identifying in the next month or two the people we want to interview, and then conduct the interviews over the winter months. We've got to transcribe those by the end of the grant period as well. So that's part of our timeline and why we're operating on the timeline that we are. But interspersed throughout that, and I want this to be organic. If things come up and we, want to add additional either group interviews or community meetings like this or scanning sessions, we will. And when I say scanning sessions, those are, I know we're going to have the first couple at the library there in Peacock Tract. These are where we're going to have a scanner set up in the library, and we're asking residents, and again, they don't have to currently live in Peacock, or maybe they never lived in Peacock. Maybe they lived in Centennial Hill, or they lived somewhere in North Montgomery, but they have memories of Peacock, or they went to school in the Peacock Tract. We know that that was true for some people. So they may not all have been residents of Peacock Tract, but if there are people who have memories either to be interviewed or for these scanning sessions, we're asking people to bring in photographs, newspaper clippings, scrapbooks, funeral programs, church bulletins, flyers related to any of the civil rights activity, to the mass meetings or to the boycott, just to be scanned. So everyone will keep the original copies in their personal collection. We would just scan a copy, and then that is going to be located on the library's website. So it will be accessible to researchers. But we're going to have some different options where people can choose, like, what do they want their stuff to be used for? If they really just want it to be available for research, we can put watermarks on the photographs so that nobody can take it and use it for any sort of commercial gain or anything like that. We want to help build a repository of all of this great community, knowledge and resources that the community can use, and that, people doing their genealogy can use, and people around the world who are researching civil rights in Alabama and Montgomery can use. And when we talk about, what history we're interested in, we are interested in the impact of the interstates. That's a big part of this project. But, and I think Warren said at our last community meeting, we're also interested in all of the vibrancy of the life in Peacock Tract prior to or after the interstate. Where did people eat? Where did they get their hair cut? What did they do? What kinds of shows were going on at, the Elks Lodge, or over at the, let's see, how do you pronounce it, CP? It's social spelled backwards.
It's Lacos.
Lacos.
But before the Lacos, it was the Carver Theater.
Carver Theater. So, what kinds of events were happening in Peacock? Which local celebrities, or, statewide or beyond, performed at these places? What were the church suppers like? Like, we just want to kind of hear about all of those things. So don't limit it to the impact of the interstate or participation in specific civil rights movement. We're not just interested in what was the march like, or what was the bus boycott like. We're interested in all of those pieces, because we want to really capture a more comprehensive, view of what Peacock Tract means to people. Because we know how historically important it is, but not everybody does. And outside of Montgomery, and even some people in Montgomery, not everybody recognizes how important this neighborhood is. And so we want to just help document all of that for future researchers or people interested in the history. So what we're asking for is at this point is help identifying who are those people we need to talk to, who are the elders in the community that have all of this history, that have the stories, who are the people we need to talk to. And then, when we host the scanning sessions, we'll need help getting the word out. We're putting together a community advisory committee of people to kind of help us with that. I know I've already asked Vincent Hall and CP, who's on the phone with us, to serve on that committee. We're looking for a couple other people to serve on that committee, just to help us get the word out and drum up support for the project. And then, hopefully we'll start with the scanning sessions. But again, if people can't make it to those, we can come to them. We could do a scanning session at a particular church. If there's a congregation that has a lot of people interested in bringing things, I could set up a scanning session and bring my scanner to their church. So, we can work with people, like whatever we need to do within the time that we have, we want to do to capture as much as we can. And then this is just a first phase, a first project. I think that more work can build off of this. I know at our last community meeting, which was held in the district at the library, there were a lot of great ideas floated around, and a lot of them we might not be able to do within the scope of this project, but we're going to put together a report at the end with all of those suggestions and things that we would recommend based on community feedback as next steps for the city to help Peacock Tract tackle. So that's kind of where we're coming from. But, we know we can't do this without your help, without your support. And so, I'd love to kind of now turn it over for any questions that anyone has or any just discussion or ideas. Like I said, this is where sometimes we hear great ideas for, maybe future potential projects. But if anyone has questions about this project, or while you've got us on here, because Sherry was the primary author on the National Register nomination, if you have questions about that too, we're happy to entertain any of that.
Hey, this is Desmond Wilson, City of Montgomery. Thank you all for the great plan. I think it's really, really great. And you got some good folks that has access to a lot of history. And I think when we conceived this grant, one of the things we were looking at, what can we do with this information going forward? So a lot of ideas came up, like, creating podcasts, creating public art to show as people walk along the trail, what this community could look like. So I think, it's very important, because I think there is another grant out there when we looked at this one, that will allow us to go to the next level. And now let's take all this information and what can we do with it now, where it's not just, a research paper or anything, but it's something more of a living history where people can see it in some type of fashion, whether it's in a museum somewhere or maybe the establishment of a Peacock Tract Community Museum, or podcasts or something. So I'm curious to see what all comes out of this. Again, I lived in that community, and I remember before the interstate, and I remember all the businesses, and you don't get that feeling when you go up there now, but you do get the feeling from what it was, and to have other people to experience what it was like to, be in an African American community that was really self-sufficient and very self-sustaining. I think that's a powerful story that I think that we'll be able to tell after all of this is completed.
Yeah. Dr. Robinson from Alabama State. I think I said this at the last meeting, but I want to reiterate it. That I know I have personally, but then I've been a part of a larger effort to gather and collect materials related to Black Montgomery. And so we wrote, we've written about different neighborhoods, about the city. And then, of course, in my time as the director of the archives on campus, I made a point to collect materials related to Black Montgomery, and particularly its neighborhoods and communities. So I think that this materials that are generated through this process would complement the collections that we already have at the university.
Katie, this is Latifah Muhammad, state member at large, Alabama Black Heritage Council. I'm wondering if some of this material can also be utilized in developing markers, historical markers, because if there is ever a trail developed, or even a site where these oral histories will be placed, where people can listen to them. I'm thinking in terms of a trail, the visibility, if it's a walking trail, or people can actually see what wasn't there in writing on a marker. If that's something also that can be considered, and certainly the Black Heritage Council has a marker logo that is utilized in many African-American communities that clearly shows it's a Black heritage area. And I would encourage those who may be of interest in terms of that would contact the Alabama Historical Commission, which is our parent organization, about those historical markers that could reflect some of that history in writing on a marker as people would travel or visit the areas.
That's a great idea. And I'm real quick, I want to say to Dr. Robinson's point, one thing we talked about with the librarians at the Montgomery Library yesterday was that this collection could go multiple places. So I think it's also possible that we could either link the stuff at the library to ASU site or vice versa, or actually have copies of everything in both places. That's the nice thing about it not being a physical collection, but digital. You know, we could have it hosted or linked in more than one place. But that's a great idea about interpretation along the trail as well. And I don't know, Warren, if you're on, if you want to say anything. I know that the city has applied for other grants. And so some of this is like, you know, if they get the funding, but I know that there are some thoughts and ideas about that, about taking some of this and using it in future interpretation along the trail specifically.
I can speak on that. We have a $36 million grant for improvements along the Selma Montgomery Trail. And within that application, we did put wayfinding signs, historical markers, and kiosks as well that will host some of this history. So when putting together the application, we did mention that we were in process of implementing this particular grant opportunity, and that we would use some of that in these kiosks along the trail.
Yes, please go ahead, Stevie.
As I spoke earlier about the urgency of identifying and capturing the thoughts of the human resources, there are some physical resources that are vanishing that people probably didn't know about. There are not very many folk who know that Percy Julian was a product of Peacock, and his home no longer exists. There are no steps. There's no evidence of where Percy Julian lived, but there are still those of us who know where the location was. And the issue is, what criteria will be available to allow you to identify a sacred space where the structures no longer exist? As I indicated, Percy Julian, the home was right across the street from where Whole Street Baptist Church is. But now all you have is a fence, and on the other side of the fence you have the interstate. So there you can find a number of places in Peacock which fall into that category. I think Georgette spoke to that when we were looking at creative placemaking, and the fact that just a set of steps leading to a particular location really means so much in terms of identifying the physical resources of the human resource that once lived in that area.
That's a
Does
great.
that make sense?
I think also too, I think also, I was looking when you put your Sanborn map up. I know for Christie left the city, we had found the site, which is right next to the Lake Coast Club. We determined that was the site where the St. Jude's Hospital first operated at. A lot of people don't know that the St. Jude's Hospital was in the Peacock Tract Community before it existed, before they built the building on Fairview Avenue. Matter of fact, it's in the St. Jude's history book, and it shows the picture of the nuns in the house, and we found on the Sanborn maps that that's where the original St. Jude Hospital was located.
That's really cool. And it would be cool to have like markers of some sort that have maybe some of those historic photographs or other documentation on them at those sites where there's maybe not a physical resource left anymore, but the space is still really important.
One other thing that's overlooked is the importance of the Mobile Street, Mobile Road, Mobile Highway corridor. It's my theory that area became such a booming economy was because of the trade route that you had from Mobile Street, leaving downtown, going through Peacock to Mobile Highway to Mobile, Alabama, and points west. And if you look at some of those early maps before the Peacock Plantation was conceived, you'll find that the Mobile Street, Mobile Road, Mobile Highway corridor is one of the reasons for the boom. And once that interstate was built, it really choked off that Mobile Street, Mobile Road, Mobile Highway corridor, but yet you still see fragments of the importance of that route that it formed a confluence with the Birmingham Highway and all of that. You can just see the businesses that were along that corridor. So I think it's important to include the Mobile Street, Mobile Road, Mobile Highway corridor as part of our conversation.
It's a good point. It's a good point. And I think a lot of this could be connected with, you know, and this is outside the scope of this particular project, but in the future, we're talking about ways to use all of this, like a driving tour or something. But I also know the city's working on ways, I think, to connect this neighborhood more with downtown and make it more pedestrian friendly. So I think there's just lots of great opportunities for interpretation. See, does anyone else have anything else they would like to share?
Yeah, Katie, could we get just a PDF or something of the that image that you had in the earlier presentation of exactly where Peacock is?
Yes.
Is that, well, is the one the first one you showed us was the area, and then the second one was the National Register, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I have a map that, because like as Sherry said, originally it extended further west all the way to the railroad.
Yeah.
So you know, we could do like a Google map too that shows that more expanded boundary.
Just sort of like the target.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
This is kind of the target, but again, it could be people who lived outside of that, or we're kind of on the boundaries. As CP said, I think you said, CP, to me in an earlier conversation that your wife lived on one side of the street, and like one side of the street was in Peacock, technically, if you look at the deeds, and one side wasn't. But again, you know, if your neighbors are across the street, you're all in the same neighborhood. So
right.
It's the western boundary on Hill Street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, we can share that with everybody. And I'll also send out a flyer with those initial community scanning session dates and the location, so that if you want to start circulating, yeah, that would be helpful. But I mean, if you all feel free to email us, if you think of people that we need to contact, that we should interview, send that our way. And we'll be in touch through more emails in the coming days, and then we'll just try to kind of keep everyone in the loop. Well, I thank you all so much again for being here. Oh, Kalanji, do you have something?
Yes. Hi. It's been a couple years ago. We had a mural project in the area, and part of that project was part of that project was the community gatherings to help inform what the visuals and the stories of the community. We did 3 sessions, a minimum of 3 sessions, where we documented using the poster boards. We asked questions, and members that attended help inform some of the information that was asked. And so I still have those poster boards. Is that something that could be of use in terms of adding on to the texture of the efforts that were made, and then also some of the memory? Some of the questions were reimagining, based on reimagining and also recalling. So I have some of that information that could be shared if you think that's be good for the project.
Yeah, we'd love to see that. How would be the best way for you to share it with us? Like maybe take a picture of them and let us.
So your scanner, well, let's see. So there.
Would it be good for the scanner?
I don't know. I have to bring them to you. I'm saying poster, but it's the sticky sheets that people typically use at conferences, and they stick on the walls. So we use that method to document. And I still have those.
Yeah, I think that would be a great addition.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll send you the dates of the scanning sessions. But like I said, if you can't make one of those, just let me know and we'll figure something out.
Okay, no problem.
All right. Anything else? Not. I thank y'all all again for coming, for making the time to be here today. It's super important that we get all of this input and have your support. If you'll think of other things, other comments, suggestions, questions, just feel free to email me on the email address that I used to send you this Zoom link. Otherwise, we will be in touch.